Yo, hey, this shit easy, nigga. Hey, all I'm talking about, nigga, I'm still out here trying to get it.
Contender Regime Boxing, checking back in with y'all, man. What's going on? So I've been getting wind of, a lot of talk and news coming out about, so-called Terence Crawford fans threatening to boycott the Earl Spence Jr. and Yordenis Ugas fight, or Earl Spence Jr. fights in general. And it's kind of sad, man. It's sad that this is the type of energy that's being put out there in the boxing community, and especially when people like me can see the bullshit behind the so-called purpose of this. I talked about this for at least a couple of years now. You can go back and look at videos that I made earlier this year in regard to Terence Crawford fans. Most of them not really being Terence Crawford fans. They just don't like Earl Spence. A lot of them are just choosing the lesser of the two evils. Whenever that fight comes up, they really don't like Terence Crawford and they really don't like Earl Spence, but they hate Earl Spence more because Earl Spence is more loved, and Earl Spence actually has a connection with his fan base. Earl Spence actually fuck with his fans. Earl Spence actually has built a foundation and a following of people that genuinely support him and want him to succeed. And they hate that. When you look at the respect that Earl Spence gets in boxing and what he's accomplished, being the #1 welterweight in the world for a nice period of time now, one of the glamour divisions, probably the most, outside of heavyweight, the most popular division in boxing. That comes with a lot of popularity, but then that also comes with a lot of hate as well. And it's people that hate both Terence Crawford and Earl Spence for other reasons that don't got shit to do with boxing. Most of those people, they just hate Earl Spence more because he's and Terence Crawford, he's the lesser of the two evils, so they can justify saying, oh, I want to see Terence Crawford beat Earl Spence ass, whatever. You know what I'm saying? Like, you can look at it from multiple different ways, but what I'm getting at is that a lot of these guys, they say that they're not gonna support Earl Spence, or they're not gonna buy the pay-per-view for Earl Spence and Ugas, and that's cool. Like, as a consumer, as a fan, if you're not happy with a product, you shouldn't pay for it. You're not obligated to spend your money on a product that is not satisfying you. By all means, speak with your dollar. As a fan, as a consumer, as a supporter, your buying power, your dollar is your power. You dig what I'm saying? Your support, that's your power. But the issue is that these same people, they don't support Terence Crawford. They don't buy any of Terence Crawford's pay-per-views. Bob Arum has come out and said multiple times that every fight that we made with Terence Crawford, we paid him a lot of money. We lost money on all those fights. Every pay-per-view flopped significantly. The last one he just did with Sean Porter did like barely 100,000. You know what I'm saying? It may have did less than 100,000. I'm not clear on the exact numbers, but it did very poorly. And this was Terence Crawford's biggest step up in competition. A common opponent with Earl Spence, who Earl Spence did upwards of 350,000 with Sean Porter in LA. You know what I'm saying? Wasn't even in Vegas. The gate was good, and the pay-per-view numbers were decent. Pretty sure the Terence Crawford and Sean Porter gate was decent, but the pay-per-view didn't reflect the support that these people claim that they give Terence Crawford over Earl Spence. Another funny thing is that before, when the whole thing when Ugas was supposedly getting caught up in this tournament, and it was looking like Earl Spence was either gonna like have to fight an IBF mandatory, which a lot of people hoped it was Jaron Boots Ennis, which of course we still don't know who the IBF mandatory gonna be. That's a whole nother conversation, but people were hoping that it was gonna be Jaron Ennis, or Earl Spence was gonna fight Terrence Crawford next. I hoped the latter. I was hoping for Earl Spence to fight Terrence Crawford next. I want that fight just like everybody else. But even with all that going on, when it looked like that, because remember, Earl Spence was supposed to unify with UGAS the whole time. Even before the Manny Pacquiao fight. UGAS had the belt. We all know that Earl Spence wants to be undisputed. He's been telling you guys this whole time that I want to get all the belts on this side, and then we'll fight Terrence Crawford for undisputed. If y'all want to disrupt those plans, we can fight right now for 60-40. We all know the whole story with the 60-40. Terrence Crawford say he don't want that. Bob Arum definitely didn't want it at the time. He want to get the biggest cut that he can get because he know that's the only fight where he can eat off Terrence Crawford. It's with Earl Spence. Bob Arum knew that he couldn't make no money with Terrence Crawford outside of him fighting Earl Spence, so he wanted to get 50-50 so he can eat as much as he can. Now that Terrence Crawford ain't with Bob Arum, on Twitter, Terrence Crawford still talking some, oh, I ain't taking 60-40 shit, whatever. But Earl Spence already is knee-deep in his game plan and strategy on what he wants to do now because he knows that fighting guys on PBC, they not going to give him no trouble in negotiation. So he can get these belts, no problems making the fights, the so-called easy route, right? So, with all that being said, when it was looking like Earl Spence wasn't going to get the Yordenis Ugas fight, it was a whole lot of so-called Terrence Crawford fans saying, yeah, man, Terrence Crawford should fight Ugas then. You know, yeah, so Terrence Crawford can have 2 belts, Earl Spence can have 2 belts, and then they go into the fight for undisputed. It was a lot of people saying that Terrence Crawford should fight Ugas while Earl Spence fights Jaron Ennis or whoever the IBF mandatory was going to be. But why all of a sudden now that the Earl Spence and Ugas fight is actually happening, now it's a problem? Because Earl Spence is the one getting that 3rd belt as opposed to Terrence Crawford unifying. And see, it's all about the lesser of the 2 evils. These people don't really support Terrence Crawford. They not truly Terrence Crawford fans. They just hate Earl Spence. And that's just simply what it is. These guys do not buy Terrence Crawford pay-per-views. They don't go to the fights. They don't support Terrence Crawford whatsoever unless it's an opportunity to take a shot at Earl the True Spence Jr. That's what it is. That's the truth behind all this shit. Whenever that fight does happen, and I'm a huge supporter of Terrence Crawford. I bought all his pay-per-views. I bought the American. I bought the Sean Porter pay-per-view. You know what I'm saying? I support Terrence Crawford. Even when I had him picked as the favorite in those fights, I just wanted to see the brother fight. Now, again, as a consumer, as a supporter, as a fan, you're not obligated to pay for these pay-per-views. But all I'm saying is that keep that same energy. If you're saying you're not going to support Earl Spence because he's not fighting Terrence Crawford, he's unifying. He's fighting in a unification match versus Yordenis Ugas, who just beat Manny Pacquiao, the real WBA champion, who Manny Pacquiao last performance before that was a win over undefeated Keith Thurman, champion in his prime. Yeah, on pay-per-view, back-to-back. You dig what I'm saying? Yordenis Ugas just beat that guy. So they saying that this fight ain't worthy. Okay, that's cool, but you got to keep that same energy. Is it that you just don't want to pay for pay-per-views in general, or you just don't want to support Earl Spence because you damn sure ain't supporting Terrence Crawford? So where was this energy at? Where was this energy when Terrence Crawford was fighting whoever he was fighting? I didn't hear nothing about no boycotts then. When y'all knew, just like Terrence Crawford came out and said that Bob Arum couldn't secure me the Earl Spence fight. So he told you what the problem was. But why the energy wasn't the same? I'll tell you why it wasn't the same. Because these people don't support Terrence Crawford. They just hate Earl Spence. And they don't like Terrence Crawford either, but he's the lesser of the 2 evils. He's the guy that you can say, okay, look, you know, he's not getting as much love as this guy. That's the guy that they like. They put Errol Spence on a pedestal. They think that he's great. They want him to be that guy. So let's hate him. Let's try to tear him down. I've been seeing the game plan the whole time. I told y'all this. I told y'all these people don't support Terence Crawford. If they did, you would have seen it in his numbers. You dig what I'm saying? So I just had to put that out there, man, just for people that was confused and wondering why, you know, all of a sudden it's an influx of Terence Crawford fans, you know, / Errol Spence haters. That's all of a sudden it's just a big target on Errol Spence back, and the man is unifying the division, and they hate that. You know what I'm saying? They act like they can't wait for one couple of more fights or one more fight. You know what I'm saying? So he can unify and make the Errol Spence and Terence Crawford fight for Undisputed. Canelo been doing this shit the whole time. They say Canelo pound for pound #1. They put Canelo on a pedestal. He get love for doing the same shit Errol Spence doing right now. You know what I'm saying? Playing chess. I'm going to get this belt. I'm going to put myself in the best position possible. So this shit going to happen on my terms. The same shit Errol Spence doing right now, Canelo been doing for years. And he get all the love in the world for it. But it's a problem that Errol Spence doing it. So that tell you right there, it ain't about what Errol Spence doing. It's about who's doing the shit. They just hate the guy. But all that does is just fuel more fire. It makes Errol Spence more popular. It makes his profile even bigger. And if he goes out there and he performs versus UGAS like I believe that he will, the same shit that I thought he was going to do to Manny Pacquiao, all that does is just, you know, it adds to a legacy that is continuously growing. And that's what I want to see. And I want to see the same thing for Terence Crawford as well. I love Terence Crawford. Think he's a great fighter. And I think that Spence versus Crawford is the biggest fight in the sport of boxing. But I mean, look, you know, if you gonna hate, man, be honest about the shit. You know what I'm saying? Don't try to use these smoke screens. Oh, I'm boycotting Errol Spence because he ain't fighting Terence. No, just flat out say, I hate the guy. Just be real with I respect you more if you're honest, man. Y'all let me know what y'all think down in the comments, man. Contender regime, boxing, I'll holler at y'all boys, man.